Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me I have two very fine guests. They are both writers, and one is the host of the Take It or Break It podcast, and one often appears with him, and both are part of a new series for the Take It or Break It podcast exclusively on Patreon, talking about the Michael Jordan years. Welcome to Corbin Smith and John Wilmes. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hi, have I been on this before? You've been on mine. I'm not sure if I've been on this.
I think you were on my other podcast briefly, but that I briefly had. But I'm not sure you've actually been on the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to be here for the first time.
Yeah.
First time, long time. Yeah.
It has been a while. Well, I'm a big fan of your guys' show. It's a lot of fun, and I'm glad you guys are getting into the NBA history game because we always welcome some good contributions to that.
Thank you. You know, Jason, a little piece of me was worried when I started doing the podcast that we were eating out of your toilet a little bit. You know, that we were.
Perfect.
Like stomping on your grounds, and so I was very happy to get a stamp of approval after we started.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm very excited. No, it's honestly, I'm happy to see more discussion about it, more people learning about it, and we're very positive about it. So it's a good time. So I think what you guys are doing kind of led into what we wanted to discuss here, which is that time that David Robinson was awarded the MVP and then got embarrassed by Hakeem Olajuwon. This is a time in which Michael Jordan was on his. Well, he had actually returned at this point, but it was at the end of his hiatus from the league, and it was definitely a time. And I think you say this about the larger 90s as well, but it was definitely a time, specifically during this point, where the big man was very, very central into the game. Hakeem and David Robinson, obviously, being among the two. Patrick Ewing, Shaquille O'Neal, a really great crop of big men during this time.
Yeah, I love that it got back to big men narratives and big men dominance almost immediately when Jordan left, right? Because it's the 1994 finals is Hakeem versus Patrick Ewing, and then there's this Western Conference Finals the following year that we're going to talk about, in which the Western Conference Finals almost functions as the finals because the Magic that year they're kind of shook basically and they weren't ready. But it's Hakeem versus David Robinson, and then it's Hakeem versus Shaq in the 95 finals. And one of my favorite anecdotes from this Jordan hiatus big man renaissance was sort of this moment in, I think it was the 94 All-Star game, maybe the 93 All-Star game, where Shaq was riding high on just being like a really sensational new force in the league. And Hakeem and David Robinson, much in the way that Michael Jordan experienced in his rookie season, sort of conspired to embarrass Shaq in the All-Star game, where Hakeem really just shut him down defensively. They held him for like 2 of 12 shooting or something. And then David Robinson just takes him off the ball and roasts him offensively in the All-Star game to sort of take him down a peg. And so this matchup between Hakeem and David Robinson very much fits into that sort of these big men sort of almost bottlenecked and clamoring for like the crown as soon as Jordan leaves.
And it was the perfect time for Hakeem too. I mean, he really stepped up in that vacuum and had really the perfect complementary team around him with a lot of really good 3-point shooters.
Yeah, really a really fascinating team, actually, I think, because, me and John have been watching a lot of these old Bulls games recently, and compared to the modern NBA, I think that those teams seem like they're playing on Mars. But in watching this Rocket squad and also the Spurs squad they were playing against, like, it's actually weirdly modern in a lot of ways. There's a lot of spacing, a lot of 3-point shooting, a lot of sort of pivoting around a guy instead of, the stuff that the Bulls were doing right after this, which was jamming everybody into a tiny triangle in the paint and just like doing all of these complicated cuts and letting Jordan beat people in isolation. So like, yeah, actually, weirdly forward thinking, even though they are teams built on the at least forward thinking of concepts, the large man.
Yeah, and well, Jason noted in our earlier conversation that they took advantage of a shorter 3-point line too. They
Yeah.
took a lot of threes, and they almost played offense the way that like the Van Gundy, Dwight Howard Magic played offense, but with just a way better post player and way better playmaker. And yeah, it's kind of funny to watch that.
Handsomer too, less irritating, better Muslim certainly.
Certainly, yeah, way more into the Quran, I would say.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Absolutely, yeah. Speaking of handsome, Clyde Drexler, I've always found him very handsome. I think he's one of the more remarkably handsome players in NBA history.
This feels like you're standing for bald people to me, but
he's one of the few people who can get away with like a faint mustache, you know?
Yeah, that's fair.
Most people have a faint mustache, and it's sort of like, you grow it out if you can, or get rid of the thing.
You got to go one way or the other with that mustache, man.
He's rocking the mid zone. It's a rare thing, and it's nice to see.
Brief aside, Corbin, do you have complicated feelings about Clyde Drexler, given that, of course, he had his best years in Portland?
I think that most Portland fans are pretty universally pro Clyde Drexler.
Okay,
and I am with them.
Okay.
The team was not doing great when he went to Houston. It was like a time to leave situation. And the road that goes into the stadium, in the loading zone in the stadium is like named Drexler Drive. He is generally thought of as the greatest or second greatest player in the history of the franchise. And so I don't think people have like a complicated relationship to Clyde Drexler at all.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's a good place to pick up sort of the story leading into this game, right? Where the Rockets had traded for Clyde Drexler some like 3 months ago, basically, right?
A Houston legend at this point, played with Hakeem in college as well.
At Houston, right? The Phi Slamma Jamma team, which Hakeem and Clyde barely lost in the national championship game in that classic North Carolina State.
I was watching a documentary about Hakeem today to prep for this, and he lost to NC State at that. It's like one of the famous all-time NCAA upsets. Jimmy Valvano, an inspirational figure. So many wonderful things you can say about that NC State team. I was mostly mad Hakeem didn't win.
Same.
While watching it. How do you feel about it, Jason?
I don't have strong opinions about college basketball, so it is interesting looking at it now because there's no emotion. I think few of us who are not NC State fans have any emotion invested into that team, and of course I think Olajuwon is pretty universally loved among basketball fans. So it's kind of like it's sort of like it's the denial of the guy, but at the time he was the Goliath and and David beat them. So it is interesting, divorced to that context, how different that feels.
So Hakeem comes back to Houston the next year. Clyde goes into the draft, right? Hakeem goes back for a year, and he's like, I'm going to win. It's gnawing at him. He wants to win the national championship. Loses again in the national championship game, this time to Georgetown, led by Patrick Ewing.
Who doesn't even have who isn't even honorable enough to not wear an undershirt. Disgusting.
Hakeem just has no team at this point. Drexler's left. Ewing has a way better team. Everybody kind of knows that Hakeem is better than Ewing, but Ewing wins the national championship game. And of course, that rivalry carries over to 1994 finals, the year before the game we're going to be talking about, when the Rockets beat the next 7 games in the NBA Finals.
John Starks famously plays one of the worst NBA Finals games of all time.
Yeah, seriously, James Harden style performance.
Wow, cold.
But I think it's probably worse than anything James Harden ever did, though.
It's probably true. Yeah.
I mean, if you combine all the Rockets from that Game 7, that when they missed like 20 straight 3-pointers, that's kind of what Starks was in that game.
So Hakeem goes to the NBA. They're almost instantly pretty good with him because they have Ralph Sampson as well, who's 7'4" and unusually athletic for a 7'4" guy. And they sort of shocked the world and make it to the finals in 1986. They beat the Lakers in 5 games, I think, in the Western Conference Finals, which includes one of the more insane buzzer beaters I had never seen before, which everybody should watch. It's like they're either tied or down by 1 with a second left in a closeout game in LA, and they throw it into Ralph Sampson, who's not even facing the basket with a second left and like catches and turns and releases all in one motion, and it goes in, and then they go to the finals. And then they lose to the Celtics, 86 Celtics.
Ooh.
Yeah, boo. Regarded as one of the better teams of all time.
Yeah, whatever. Who cares?
The Rockets win is also notable because Mitch Kupchak, in his final NBA game, started a fight with Hakeem and got both of them thrown out of the game.
Oh.
There's going to be another reference to a classic NBA fight later involving Rockets coach, 1994 Rockets coach, Rudy Tomjanovich. But at this point, after 86, the assumption is, hey, like this Rockets team is really, forgive the pun, taking off. However, Sampson gets hurt the following year. Shocker, 7'4" athletic dude gets hurt, right? They only get past one round of the playoffs. And then shit really goes bad for Hakeem, right? They don't win another series for 5 years. And I think that Jason made the comparison earlier to his situation with the Rockets over these stagnant years, sort of like the dynamic that Kawhi is in with the Spurs right now, and that we've seen a number of disgruntled players in.
Yeah, and there was a lot of issues with people accusing, Hakeem of exaggerating an injury, and he even did.
His owner did. His owner literally was like, "You are exaggerating an injury."
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that got very personal, very, very quickly, and and the Rockets were like a really weird. Like, they just decided to basically throw out the same team there every year, even though they were winning, 40, 45 games, which obviously is, like, your minimum with Hakeem, with a player that brilliant. But they really did not have a team that was well-built around him. They just kind of kept trudging out the same thing and, with the same pattern until they kind of figured it out in 93. Hakeem got happier, the team got better, and then, of course, built to the 94 championship season.
Satisfyingly enough, Rockets owner Charlie Thomas, who was the one who got into a spat with Hakeem about faking an injury or whatever the fuck it was, he ends up selling the team in 93 and isn't around to enjoy the championships that they get right after that.
Yeah, eat it.
Right?
Eat it, old man.
And so 93 is a good year for the Rockets, though. They get Vernon Maxwell. They get a lot of these good players to perfectly complement Hakeem, who's also just gotten better himself, right? He's become a way better playmaker, most of all. And he's become just a lot more calm in his, moves and everything, where, these masterful fakes and footwork that he's known for, this is when this stuff starts to really flourish, right?
He has embraced his Muslim faith. He doesn't he fasts on Ramadan now. He's a totem of calm. In an NBA that I think was stormier than a lot of NBAs we've had, I'd even go as far to say.
Stormier how?
Well, we're talking about Jordan a lot lately. There's truly no more troubled, successful soul imaginable than Michael Jordan. Barkley, certainly a bit of a tempest in a teapot. Ewing, entirely too sweaty. It was a rowdy. It was like an earlier rowdy. It was a bit of a rowdy time. It was a rowdy time, not in the way that Iverson was a rowdy time, but it was a rowdy time in that these dudes had outsized personalities and always seemed kind of on the precipice of breaking up like a space shuttle. You know what I mean? That
contrasts a little bit with Magic and Bird, where, Magic had the squeaky clean reputation, and Bird was quiet, but he stood out with his play, but didn't really, he was kind of, aw shucks when you got anything out of him. So, and they were both, some of their rough edges were hidden by the media coverage that they had at the time, but, they were kind of obviously they were the faces of the league in the 80s and kind of established this baseline of non-controversial, success. Yeah. And then the personalities.
Kareem was a pretty antsy dude for his first 10 years, but when he was playing with Magic, I think that was probably less the case.
Yeah, agreed.
It was more of a bastards league back then, I would say. There are bastards in the league now, like for instance Draymond Green, but they're a little more conspicuous and a little more anachronistic. Right?
Joel, I would go as far to say Joel is definitely a bastard.
He's definitely a bit of a bastard. Way super into the head games. Gonna get away with any sneaky, dirty play he can get away with. Definitely gonna try to get that huge psychological and physical edge, extra physical edge in the game. Whereas at this time, the league is completely that way. Everybody's doing that. All the best players are doing that. And for somebody like Hakeem to be like just like very centered and religious amidst this is notable, obviously. So the 93, 94 Rockets are basically the best, if one of the best, if not the best team in the league, pretty much all season. And they win the championship, right? They get a pretty good fight from the Knicks. 7 games, obviously, it's a good fight. But
Hakeem is the MVP.
Hakeem is the MVP. Nobody's surprised.
Depoy too, as I recall. Yeah.
94, 95, the season we're looking at, not that way.
No.
Like the weight of expectations makes this a much different season because the team doesn't necessarily bear those expectations very gracefully throughout the season.
Yeah, and this led to a really incredible playoff run. You know, one of the greatest in NBA history. They were the lowest seed to ever win an NBA Finals, being the 6th seed, and they were the first to beat 4 50-game winners to do so. The 2001 Lakers later did it as well, but they were only 11th in the league in SRS that year. 47-35, obviously a pedestrian record. You already talked about the midseason trade. Sending Otis Thorpe for Clyde Drexler, which honestly didn't really right away improve the team. They had a worse record after the trade than they did before the trade. In similar SRS, they didn't really come together until the playoffs themselves.
Yeah, and so part of the reason, perhaps the main reason they actually ended up pulling the trigger on the trade was a week before it happened. Vernon Maxwell, who was really good for the team, gets in a fight with a fan. He goes actually in Portland, where Drexler is playing at this point, which apparently the Portland Trailblazers' home court was just a microwave of discontent at this point.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. Look, Memorial Coliseum, baby. There's no more old Portland place than the Memorial Coliseum.
So I think this is the first year that Rick Adelman is not coaching the Blazers, right? And PJ Carlesimo, who
that's correct to me.
Who everybody hates playing for. Latrell Sprewell literally chokes him a few years later.
Yeah.
Drexler doesn't like playing there. It's not a great environment. Vernon Maxwell goes into the stands to fight a fan who was talking smack. Right. Maxwell later alleges that this guy was saying racist stuff. This guy was saying.
I'm just going to go ahead and say I probably believe Vernon Maxwell on that one.
Vernon Maxwell also alleges that this person was saying very specific things about Maxwell's stillborn child, which is really not okay.
Good God.
The fan later says, I didn't say any of that. I didn't even know he had a stillborn child, which, I probably lying, In any event, Vernon Maxwell was always kind of a hothead. He gets suspended 10 games. While he's suspended, they trade for Drexler. Maxwell comes back and is very unhappy because Drexler has basically usurped his role on the team, right? Now all of a sudden he's a reserve. Maxwell ends up, this is a really important player to their championship run, ends up just straight up leaving the team after one playoff game.
Yeah, crazy.
They just invent an injury and allow him to go away, which is what I think that happened with the Cavaliers and Derrick Rose this year, by the way.
But in the game I watched, I actually accidentally watched a different game as well as the game. People knew that Maxwell was discontented about his playing time.
I mean, how could you not be, right?
Yeah.
They go out and trade for a legendary player who's playing at your position.
Yeah.
After you played at that position, winning a championship.
See, this is what happens when you double down on positionality, though. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Yeah. The 90s were nothing if not doubling down on positionality, though.
Yes, that is the case. There is literally one of the, I think, wild things about Michael Jordan, I think, is that there is not another player who is more shooting guard than Michael Jordan. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, in a weird way, almost Kobe is more shooting guard than Michael Jordan, but not in a good way.
Yeah. That might be there.
Yeah. I would say that it's in a bad way, actually.
Well, yeah.
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 A hideous way, a heinous way, a league-ruining way. Kobe is the ultimate dude who wasn't a bastard, but was just constantly trying to convince everybody and himself that he was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's a cosplay superstar for sure.
Oh yeah, 1000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's basically a dude who's way too into Civil War reenactment.
I don't know. I see what you guys are saying, but I do think that being a bastard just kind of came naturally to him, given some of the behavior. But
no. I mean, he was a prick, certainly.
Sure.
He was like a jerk,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean he was a bastard.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that he was like, that he was like one of these dudes who like, he wasn't a rogue in any way. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
Draymond is a rogue.
Yeah.
I think MJ on a certain level has a sort of roguish spirit. I think especially in his post-playing career. For instance, Jason, you've probably seen this picture recently of Michael Jordan holding a 2/3 drank bottle of tequila and walking down the street with notably red eyes.
I've heard about this, yes.
Things of that nature.
Happens to be right after LeBron loses the finals and thus loses points in the legacy debate.
It's pretty easy to imagine that perhaps Michael Jordan was out celebrating that he was still better than LeBron.
It seems possible that he would have been celebrating such a thing very, very publicly.
Yeah. But I think Kobe doesn't quite have that thing where he's like a rogue. There's too much control there.
Listen, any way you want to say something bad about Kobe is.
We will 1,000% get on board. I can't speak for Jason, but it's anything bad you want to say about Kobe. Me and Wilmes will be onto. Andrew Bynum was better than he was.
Absolutely, 100% all the way.
Yeah.
To return to our subject.
Reggie Miller better than Kobe.
To return to our subject, this Rockets team post Vernon Maxwell ends up, as we said, going on one of the more spectacular playoff runs of all time. Probably most spectacular is their second round series against the Phoenix Suns, who they went to a 7-round series with in the playoffs the previous season as well. And this is just Charles Barkley's heart getting ripped out over and over and over again, right? And perhaps in this series more than ever, because the Suns go up 3-1 and they have home court advantage, and they've been the better team all season. And all these Rockets guards and wings and role players just sort of start becoming unbelievable assassins and making every clutch shot they need to and playing in perfect inside-out symmetry with Hakeem. Perhaps the most famous of all the many shots they make is Mario Elis. I think it was Game 7, game-winning 3, where he does it and then he does like a kiss of death into the air. And this is the high that the Rockets are riding on going into San Antonio. We should probably set up the Spurs a little bit before we get into the meat of this game, too. We've been talking a lot about the Rockets.
Somebody tell me about the Spurs.
The Spurs actually are kind of I've forgotten some of the players who are on this team. Of course, Dennis Rodman is there, the second of his 2 seasons with the Spurs. He and Robinson definitely made an interesting pair, although they did perform well on the court, at least during the regular season. Spurs mainstays Sean Elliott, Avery Johnson, and Vinny Del Negro. Also, Doc Rivers toward the end of his career.
For some reason, this team just had every insufferable coach on it. Every coach you don't like now was on that Spurs team.
Yes,
yeah.
Vinny.
This is all coaches. I didn't realize that. That's crazy.
Doc, Avery Johnson, just like dude. Who's the fella who calls Spurs games now really poorly? Sean Elliott. It's just like 1,000 dudes who. Maybe people were like, that's a good dude at the time, but now you're like, oh my God, I loathe that guy.
Well, they were mostly fun players. Chuck Person, the rifleman, of course, Terry Cummings, even Moses Malone, who he at this point, he retired early on in the season. He did attend this game. I'm not sure if he was in like part of the Spurs staff or just happened to be there to celebrate Robinson's MVP since he was a former 3-time MVP, but he was there as well. So they were 62-20, which had been their best season so far in history. It was their first year for Gregg Popovich as general manager and Bob Hill as the coach. They had won 55 games a year before, but they lost in the first round, which made them change their regime. In the playoffs, they actually swept the Nuggets handily with Robinson dominating Dikembe Mutombo, and they beat the...
what a shame. Yeah. What a shame.
And they beat the Lakers 4-2 with Robinson leading both teams in scoring in 5 of the 6 games. So
I was at a party last night. I'm going to tell a very brief side story. I was at a party last night for the NBA MVP awards, which were last night, and my girlfriend Maureen was with me. And
shout out to Maureen.
Yeah, shout out to
Hey.
Maureen.
Hi, Maureen.
Hey, Maureen.
Yeah.
There's no way she'll listen to this one.
No, I was imagine not, but nevertheless.
And Mutombo was accepting a humanitarian award, I think is the concept behind that award. Is this correct? Yeah, it is. And I was like, and Maureen had never heard his voice before. And the party was like drowning out most of the sound from the thing. We were just kind of watching to see that James Harden won instead of, really taking anything in. And Maureen had never heard his voice before. So we found a remote and we turned it up a little bit, and she could only hear the high parts of his voice at first. But then it like got to a point where she could hear the whoa, 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 whoa part, and she was like, "Oh my god!" Anyway, it was just a real like pleasure to share Mutombo's voice with somebody the first time, and then tell them the Who Wants to Sex Mutombo story,
It's always
the
fun.
greatest story of all time. You know who would not yell "Who Wants to Sex" and then say their name? David Robinson.
Probably
would not
not.
yell that.
No.
And that's
Certainly
what.
not.
Yeah. Anyway, continue.
David Robinson is a maniac this year. He's a man on a mission. He wins the MVP. He deserves to win the MVP. I don't know if it's this year. It might be the previous season, but in one of the two seasons, he clocks a quadruple double, which is obviously an insane thing that has happened. Jason, do you happen to know how many times it's happened ever?
There are 4 players who have done it, and Robinson and Olajuwon are two of the 4.
There you go. Yeah, he has assists, steals, blocks. I don't even remember. He has four obviously points and rebounds and blocks, and I think it ends up being assists and not steals. Getting 10 steals is like insane. So he gets a quadruple double. He also, in keeping with his spite for Shaquille O'Neal, scores 71 points in a completely meaningless end of this literally last game of this season, when they've already clinched home court advantage, I think throughout even the finals. Totally meaningless game, and Shaq and Robinson are like neck and neck all season, right? And and Robinson just pours in 71 points on a shitty Clippers team, like to just sort of get those numbers, and then he gets a scoring title by like a fraction of a point.
Is it possible that Robinson lost this series because Jesus Christ was punishing him for his hubris?
It is definitely possible.
Yeah.
I bet it's certainly possible. Well, I don't want to speculate.
There's another religious possibility here, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, interesting.
But it's certainly possible that David Robinson has had that thought, right?
Yeah.
I'm being punished for my hubris today.
Yeah.
Right? There was a hilarious conference call prior to, I think it was this season or the year before, where David Robinson was on a conference call, and he's just always getting asked about Shaq. All the big men at this point in the league are constantly most players, not even just big men, are constantly being asked questions about Shaq because he's such a nascent star, such a celebrity. He's such a new.
He's Kazam, baby.
And David Robinson in this conference call just sort of goes on a bit of a monologue about how he doesn't care about Shaq and how he doesn't have what anybody wants. And it just kind of goes on for a while. And he's like, I'm not losing any sleep over it. I'll let you know I'm losing sleep over it. And it's like the most I'm not mad kind of like monologue of the NBA 90s, perhaps. Like, I'm not mad about Shaq. I don't care about Shaq. And so that, like, again, sort of defines like this competition that's going on between these big men, right? The 2 years that Jordan is gone, 2 big men win the MVP. All the sort of championship glory is decided between big men. And at this game, as you noted, Moses Malone is a end of his road, but bench warmer for the Spurs. But he's in the building, right? And Kareem is also in the building watching in the stands. There's a lot of big man energy.
Why is Kareem there?
Because he wanted to go there for the big man showdown.
Yeah. Dave Cowens is a assistant coach for the Spurs as well. So another former big man MVP.
Of course, Gregg Popovich is in the building. He is 7 feet tall. Fine, whatever.
Yeah.
Apparently nobody thought that was funny. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just
fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Corbin,
It's just
stop ruining my show, okay?
I'm sorry.
You can ruin your own show.
show.
This is a very serious show. We don't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This isn't take it or break it.
No.
It's not about goofs.
Not playing games.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, guys.
Okay, all right.
I watched Moses Malone had a lot of influence on Hakeem early in his career, though. Because Hakeem in the offseason, he would work out with Moses, and Moses would apparently just like beat the shit out of him. Yeah. And like Hakeem's like test of will was to go back and get more helpings from Malone, like practice after practice. And apparently at the end of the season, this was between his second and third seasons at the University of Houston, and apparently sort of in between there, sort of at the end, Hakeem finally got one dunk off on him. And it's just a really inspiring story about how if we keep pushing, someday we can all humiliate the Moses Malones in our life.
Indeed. Yeah, because Hakeem came to the game late. I mean, he was relatively late to basketball, so he obviously had incredible athletic gifts, but he developed very, very fast from being a raw project to being, incredibly complete player, even young in his career. I mean, he could do everything. As he matured, as he talked about, he obviously developed, even better skills and better passing, and was smarter at defense and all that good stuff. But I mean, he was a fairly complete player in terms of being able to do just about everything, almost right away in the NBA.
Yeah, and so he comes up against David Robinson, right? And this is, as Jason, you noted in our earlier conversations, a naturalized American citizen, Hakeem, going up against a symbol of the U.S. war machine, David Robinson.
Yeah.
David Robinson, literally.
Look, it's time for me and John to start slandering David Robinson. Jason, you don't need to join us. But David Robinson went to West Point. He was a propagandist for an American war machine. He was at the time playing the part of a guy who was everything you wanted from an American athlete. He respected the military. Before he received his MVP award, he said that he was proud that he got the opportunity to glorify Jesus Christ with his play on the court. This guy is insufferable.
I mean, without even getting into all the subjective wind that Corbin is throwing at our audience right now, David Robinson literally makes the Spurs wait for 2 years after they draft him so that he can do 2 years of service.
Yeah, because the military is like, you can go play professional sports, and he's like, no.
Yeah,
I will do my duty and kill people for the government.
Yeah, even the military itself is like, David, it's not that big of a deal. And he's like, I am going to serve for 2 years. David Robinson at this point, I watched a video sort of talking about the Robinson-Shaq beef, and they literally contrast Shaq as, well, I don't think you really need to say anything about Shaq. We all know who he is, what his attitude is. And they contrast David Robinson by showing a brief snippet of a commercial he was in, a sort of advertorial around this time, where he was saying not to drink on prom night.
Oh my God. Boo!
He is, however, a complete berserker in this NBA this season.
Can we wait? Are we done? Are we still done? Are we done slandering David Robinson yet?
We can vacillate. We can.
Okay, cool. Because I've got more things to point out about David Robinson.
He is, for all intents and purposes, Captain America, right? He is definitely Steve Rogers.
But without the sort of humanity that Chris Evans brings to the performance,
I don't want to completely rob David of his humanity. He was always respectful of his team, of his opponents, except for Shaq.
Yeah.
Shaq was the one who he really wasn't respectful to. He definitely respected Hakeem, except for in this one moment at the beginning of this game. We specifically chose this game because it's the game in which Robinson is awarded the MVP trophy at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. Prior to the game, David Stern cannot contain his grin whatsoever.
Yeah, because this is the perfect guy to win this MVP. You know what I mean? Finally we've got an American hero taking the trophy home. None of this weird Michael Jordan stuff we have to cover up all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. David Stern has gotten his way. He's pushed Jordan out of the league.
Yeah.
And now
because Jordan liked gambling too much. So he had to serve a suspension because
and now he gets to hand the trophy to a bridge player.
Yeah.
Right? And he loves it. Hakeem makes the mistake, though, of giving deference to all recent recipients of the MVP trophy, except for the man who had won it the year before, who was Hakeem Olajuwon.
Who was sitting right there.
Who's sitting right there, and who is better than David Robinson, right?
Oh.
He hasn't had a better season, but he is the better player. And all of these Rockets role players certainly notice that this is happening, and they very much remind Hakeem of it as the game is starting, right?
Unless I'm mistaken, Kenny Smith says something to the degree, could be somebody else. Who knows? There's no way to check. Says something to the degree of, man, he's taking your trophy, huh? And Hakeem says, I will get the big trophy.
That's what he says to all his dudes, right? And they know this is a part of what makes this Rockets team so effective and so unique is just the way that they very suddenly sort of like rallied together. Like, I don't want to get too airy here, but spiritually, right? And Drexler is a new member of this team, but since he has such a long relationship with Hakeem, they played together in college. They know each other from Houston. And they've talked over the years, and for years, Hakeem and Drexler have said, just wait until we can play together. I really hope that can happen, and now it's happening. And this team really is.
It's a shame it didn't go the other way. We would have loved Hakeem in Portland.
Oh, dream on.
Yeah, Portland Trailblazer legend Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah, plus you could have had him and Drexler together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like when it reminded me, well, so Kenny Smith is an appropriate entry point because when Terry Rozier played really well in the playoffs this year, sort of for a lot of fans came out of nowhere. For me, I certainly didn't have much of a awareness of Terry Rozier until he started just killing dudes in the playoffs this year. During the TNT halftime or whatever, Kenny Smith said that it reminded him of Sam Cassell, who's on this Rockets team, right? Mm-hmm. And so to imagine these sort of clutch play and postseason emergence of a guy like Terry Rozier, but on this Rockets team, that's happening with like 4 dudes. Yeah. It's just like all these dudes who you don't necessarily expect anything from, all of a sudden playing out of their mind.
This reminds me a little bit of the 2011 Mavericks, who were kind of built. They had the same, one incredible player who was their main focus, and then kind of built everything to perfect, like kind of the perfect engine around him, with the right role players. They were a bit of an older team, and obviously they had not already won a championship, but I feel like there's a lot of parallels in terms of the playoff run, the expectations, and kind of the way that they formed that team, and how when they really kicked into gear and were able to smash through teams, especially in that finals.
Yeah, I mean, if Houston is significantly younger, and like most of the dudes on Dallas were sort of washed in various degrees, but I think that's a really good comparison.
This is you get to see. Obviously, they've won the previous year, and Robert Horry was on the team then. But in this game, you see flashes of what's to come from Robert Horry in future years with the Spurs and with the Lakers.
At some point in this game, they say that Robert Horry looks like Will Smith on the broadcast. Robert Horry does not look like Will Smith.
I don't think it's. I think that there's a slight resemblance. What do you think, Jason?
I think it's very slight, but he doesn't have the ears, which I think makes a difference. Yeah.
Like they both have flat tops. That's the most you can say. But so did Patrick Ewing at the time. Nobody would say Patrick Ewing looks like Will Smith.
Well, the skin tone was more similar, I think, between
Okay.
Yeah.
So did J.R. Reed, who's on this Spurs team.
Yes.
Also another flat top for you.
The Spurs team, which I really have to stress, is probably the most loathsome collection of basketball players I've ever seen collected.
Well, they do have.
Hey,
they do have.
Do not disparage Terry Cummings, okay? Let's.
Okay, all right, Terry Cummings, I'll give you, but okay. Doc Rivers.
Terry can stay. They have Rodman though, and they have Rodman's best friend who doesn't play, Jack Haley.
Yeah,
who is such a good best friend to Rodman.
Boy,
who is so mercurial that when Rodman gets traded to the Bulls have to eventually also acquire Jack Haley just to hang out with him.
Jack Haley's like a big white guy, right? He's like a big white stiff, if I recall. Oh,
he's very rarely on the Bulls to Jack Haley even have warm-ups on. He's just in a suit, pretty much. He's just taking up that roster spot, sitting in a suit, hanging out with Dennis Rodman. a good friend of mine and of the blogosphere. Ricky O'Donnell and I were talking last night, and he said when he was a kid, he did a drawing in school, and he drew every player on the Bulls, of the 95, 96 Bulls, and they were all in uniform, except he drew Jack Haley in a suit.
That's very good.
So he's on this Spurs team, which can we talk briefly?
They talk about Rodman so much on the broadcast, though. Was just Rodman the only thing anybody ever talked about at the time?
Spurs? Yeah.
No, with anybody. It just seems like they just can't stop talking about Rodman.
Yeah, well,
Anyway.
Rodman's like punkiness is pretty fresh at this point, because he was always a disruptive and sort of wild player on the Pistons, but he was never this lifestyle god on the Pistons. That happened when he went to San Antonio. It was a reaction to like losing his father figure in Chuck Daly, and to losing his sense of identity from the Pistons, and like reinventing himself.
And like meeting David Robinson and realizing how lame he was, and just doing everything he could to not be like David Robinson.
I think it's fair to say that there's a ton of resentment in the tones of the broadcasters when they talk about Rodman in this game.
You know what? I watched another game that Walton called. Walton seemed all right with him.
Yeah, it was the local broadcasters, so I'm sure they knew extra stuff, and they were also very like, they kept referring to like national media reporters like stirring up rumors or something, as if they were like making up things, and then they were. They were clearly pretty dismissive of Rodman. They even groaned when he took a 3-pointer, which was not the smartest shot ever, but they were pretty openly hostile to him there. I mean, the fact that it says something that they were only able to trade him for Will Perdue after this. I mean, Rodman was not well regarded by a lot of people during this time. Obviously he was still a good player, but the off-court shenanigans and the attitude stuff had really only, I think, could have worked on the Bulls at this point. I don't think any other team really had the infrastructure to handle him.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. I can't think of anything quite like that. Maybe if Draymond Green like turned his shenanigans up like a lot.
Draymond definitely has whiffs of that around him, especially and how he regards Thompson. But
yeah, he causes a lot of stress within the Warriors organization. But he's so good that they handle it. But
Yeah.
I also think most NBA teams can handle it, because it's nowhere near what Rodman was causing.
Yeah, I mean, Draymond's responsible, he seems like a relatively responsible person, and he does crazy things kind of on the court, but off the court, like he seems like he has it together from everything that I've read, at least. And Rodman definitely.
I've heard he enjoys a drink from time to time.
Oh well, okay, but
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
He does usually get in a fight with a fan like every offseason at a bar.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Yeah.
But that's nothing close to the insanity that Rodman was getting into.
Right.
Where the thing was that the Bulls understood that like it just didn't stress them out that much as long as he was at practice, and as long as he was at games, and as long as he was playing out of his mind, which he did, in which he didn't. He played out of his mind in San Antonio too. He didn't play very great in this particular game. Actually, he didn't have a great game. He does have to guard Hakeem at various points of this series, though.
Nah.
He can't do that. Yeah,
nope.
No.
Not even
He can guard
close.
Shaq, though. He ends up guarding Shaq extremely well in the next season for the Bulls. But he can't guard.
I mean, it's because you can guile Shaq, but you can't guile Hakeem. There's nobody who's like more a guileful than Hakeem Olajuwon.
This is going to be the third recent podcast I mentioned this on, but David Robinson takes Rodman out to dinner and tells him that Jesus is going to save his life. And Rodman says, I can't live that life. Popovich hates Dennis Rodman. They trade him for Will Perdue, as you mentioned, who is not even good. And that's Rodman's brief stay on the Spurs.
And Rodman was like in his mid-30s at this point too, so he was looking like there was also reason to think that he was going to decline. I mean, it was not a good trade, but it was more understandable at the time than it looks now, for sure.
The way that he played was not like that. Was that's a short timeline. You can't.
Yeah.
He's rough, and like I said, he's guarding Shaq in the post the next season. Like, you're so undersized, you're giving up so much size. Like, you can definitely do it as he did through pure wiles and intelligence and willpower, but your body will break down.
Who's even the comp? You know what I mean? Like, who's even the comp to that dude?
For Rodman?
Yeah.
I mean, the closest thing is Draymond. They're
Yeah, but
obviously big
Draymond is
differences, though.
but Draymond is not as hustly. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, he's
Like
not.
Draymond is like definitely more cerebral.
Draymond's a way better offensive player, obviously. Handles the ball better, passes better.
Rodman had that a little bit when he was with the Pistons. It kind of post early '90s, but not to the degree that Draymond did.
No. Rodman has never dyed his hair or gotten a tattoo or a piercing until he gets to the Spurs, right?
Right.
Rodman was a way better rebounder than Draymond, like a way better defender. Even though Draymond's
does Draymond have a tattoo?
No, I don't think so.
Check this out. Continue talking, gentlemen.
We got to have our Draymond. I think that Draymond may go down a Rodman phase. Like if things go bad, if things eventually start to decay in the Warriors, and he has to go somewhere else. And he loses that previous sense of identity, and he has to like go wild. It's something that we might have to look forward to.
Guys, Draymond Green and his childhood friend, NFL player Jonas Gray, have matching tattoos reading "Easy" in the same font on the same arm.
Ah, that's nice. Friends.
What do you guys think about the Spurs? So the Spurs in this current day and age, their insignia is all black and white. At this point in 1995, they have what they call the Fiesta colors.
Yeah. Which are, I don't know if you guys have the same associations with pink and green that I do, pastel pink and green that I do, but those are like literally the colors of Japanese shoujo comics. That's like what Japanese girl comics use for colors.
So when I was in the early 90s, and I was fairly seriously into the NBA at that point. I was about 11 or 12 or so. And the Spurs for a while, and David Robinson himself, were actually very cool. And those colors were the Fiesta colors. On my playground, they were very cool. And in my defense, like the way that David Robinson played basketball was actually like really like awesome and like aesthetically pleasing, and he just got everywhere on the court. He was a great dunker. He had pretty cool commercials.
Can we just pause for half a second though?
Okay.
Hakeem is just so much cooler though.
Yeah, but I didn't see that at that point. I mean, I agree with you. 39-year-old Jason agrees with you, but 12-year-old Jason saw David Robinson a lot more than he saw Hakeem for whatever reason, and
because the national media was trying to shove his Christian values down your throat, man.
Perhaps.
David Robinson, Corbin is, as he's wont to do, getting a little carried away with his slander here.
Sure.
I think that a lot of what you're saying is valid, Corbin, but you're glazing over what Jason is saying, which is very true, which that David Robinson was amazing to watch. Like, he was a complete maniac who did so many different things on the court with so much energy. Also a guy whose body couldn't do it forever. By the time they ended up getting Tim Duncan, it was like they needed that to stay a contender, right? Tim Duncan was pretty much better than David Robinson right away, which isn't saying too much wrong about David Robinson, because obviously Tim Duncan's one of the best players.
Yeah, Tim Duncan is the best player post Jordan, except maybe LeBron. Probably LeBron.
Yeah, I would say LeBron one and Duncan two, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I mean Robinson was and I think maybe a little undervalued in his career, just in general. I mean he was an extraordinary performer. I talked about how great he was in '95 and how he deserved to be the MVP. I think the idea of whether Olajuwon or Robinson was the better player during this era is actually, I think, a little bit more of a toss-up than you guys are saying. I mean, I would agree with Hakeem overall, but I think it's very, very close.
Yeah, I personally am into like legacy stuff, like who won and like who showed out during the big moments,
Mm-hmm.
And when a series like this goes down the way that it went down, that's just like an argument ender.
I mean, we are literally talking about a game where David Robinson got the MVP award and then got torched.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Not torched as badly as I thought, though.
Yeah, not really.
Right.
Hakeem goes off for 41, but Robinson has an outstanding line in this game, too. He does a lot.
Yeah. Olajuwon had 41 points, 16 rebounds on 61 true shooting. Robinson had 32 points, 12 rebounds on 66% true shooting. Robinson had 5 turnovers. Hakeem had 4 turnovers. Now, overall in the series, it's pretty massively in favor of Hakeem. For Hakeem, 35 points, 12.5 rebounds on 56% shooting. Robinson only 23 points on 45% shooing. So yeah, clearly in the series, Hakeem dominated this game individually. Not quite as much. I mean, obviously Hakeem had the better game, but it was fairly close here. And yeah, so if you look more at like the head-to-head stuff, it's actually like Robinson before this point really the head-to-head was very close in terms of numbers and team record disparity. It was overall in their career it was 30-12 in favor of Robinson, which again I agree with you guys that this game and this series does say a lot, but there's other evidence that I think has been not really discussed very much I think that at least I think should be considered when we talk about this in general.
Yeah, I think that a big part of it too is just the greatness of Tim Duncan has led us to forget about David Robinson a little more, because those legacies sort of just like there was no gap, it was Duncan, the Duncan era so quickly, and the Robinson era was over so quickly, and we didn't really get a time to appreciate it. Also ended.
You know what I have to say about that?
Huh?
Good.
I thought you would say that. I feel like you developed these bad feelings for David Robinson like over the last few days.
Oh, I definitely did. There's no better argument for no, I definitely am developing Jerry West feelings about David Robinson.
Yeah.
For people who don't listen to my podcast, I loathe Jerry West so much. I think that he lost over and over and over and over. He was just so thoroughly, insanely dominated by Bill Russell for a whole decade. He wrote a book where he just sort of whined about stuff a whole bunch. He also had clinical depression, which I understand is a bummer. But there's literally a point in that book where he says, Bill Bradley used to refuse to do ads because he felt like his black teammates didn't get the same opportunities. And Jerry West goes, I always really admired that. But like the central thing of that dude is that he is like there's like not enough there to do the same thing as Bill Bradley in that situation or to overcome Bill Russell. There's just like no guts in that guy. And what did he do after he played in the NBA? He became a front office worm. You know what I mean? And he was like good at being a front office worm who just hated himself back to front. I love Jerry West. But anyway, yes, I'm starting to get some Jerry West feelings about David Robinson. First off, propaganda tool for the American imperial war machine. That's not good. Second, into Jesus in a way that I find just a little bit unnerving. Only won titles when he started playing with Tim Duncan. Told Dennis Rodman to find Jesus. Told people not to drink on their prom night. At the beginning of this game, David Robinson, I've already mentioned, is like, I'm so glad that I get to bring glory to Jesus Christ. He then steps onto the court and gets so thoroughly torched by a practicing Muslim that you can't come away from that game not thinking that Christianity is false and a lie, and that Islam is the way and the truth and the light. And then David Robinson would go on to get owned by Shaq over and over in the playoffs. Now, given Robinson sort of beat him in 2003, but he didn't really beat him in 2003.
99 as well. 99 too. Yeah.
Oh, he beat Shaq in 9. Okay. You know what? Fair enough. I'll give him 3-2 on Shaq, but Shaq is also a Muslim. I'm just saying that he spent a lot of time getting beat by Muslims while professing faith in Jesus Christ. And I'm just saying that that really stacks up to a big pile of evidence that, Jesus didn't die on the cross for our sins and that Muhammad is the only prophet of the one true God.
Corbin, do you think that David Robinson bums Jesus out?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
He's just like, get your name out of my mouth, David Robinson.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you're boring, dude. Jesus was a social radical. And you think Jesus would have approved of David Robinson joining the military, man? of being a part of the United States death machine, of being a propaganda tool of the state. That's not the Jesus Christ I read about. Let me tell you that right now.
You want to know a hilarious detail of the latter days of the Shaq David Robinson beef?
More than anything.
Shaq started building up this. It's a lie. It's a complete lie. I buried the lead. But Shaq started building up this myth that when he was in high school, Shaq played high school in San Antonio. He went to high school in San Antonio, and he made up this story about how he went to go see David Robinson and asked for his autograph, and Robinson said no, and that had always motivated him against Robinson. And Robinson was always like, I don't remember that. I don't know what he's talking about. And Shaq was like, it's true. And he even published it in a book. And then like several years after he retired, he was like talking to, I think, Ernie Johnson, and he was just like, that was a lie. I just made that up.
Look, I'm just saying, everybody who Robinson goes up against, I can't imagine rooting for Robinson over them.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, in fairness, though, Shaq is a literal cop and also very pro-military. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So there.
Shaq's also prop. Look, Hakeem is like a pure. Like I could like watching Hakeem dominate Robinson is just pure joy and light. Like it's a beautiful truth in this universe.
There's a 1991 Washington Post article by Michael Wilbon, of all people, talking about David Robinson's recent conversion, and he credited it with writing to the Spurs owner Rip McCombs and demanding that the team be. I think they were the last in the league to have to fly commercial, and demanding that the team get charter flights so that they could, not have the disadvantage that the rest of the league had. So apparently, at least in that aspect, David Robinson embraced Jesus' social justice methods.
Ugh.
It disgusts Corbin.
It does disgust Corbin. This show took a turn I was not expecting, and I try to expect anything when Corbin's on the show. So
yeah, but I know everything I learned about David Robinson just makes me go, this is not a person I would want to root for.
Couple things I want to say about the Spurs aesthetically at this point.
Sure.
I prefer when they have some color in the uniform, as I prefer all sort of 90s insignia and uniforms to current day stuff. Which
all right, Chicago Wilmes over here.
Shut up! I'm talking. I prefer the maximalist, colorful, expressive stuff to the minimalist, drab, austerity fare of current days. Terrible stuff. Especially these warm-ups they have that are like collared shirts and they have the Fiesta color stripes across them.
I do kind of like the warm-ups. I'll give you the warm-ups.
Yeah, the warm-ups are actually kind of cool, yeah.
And they're playing in the Alamo Dome, which I believe is structured differently now and also is no longer where the Spurs play for over a decade. But there's this giant curtain that's like right next to the court. It's a pretty short amount of seating adjacent to the court until there's this giant curtain for whatever structural reasons. And it creates a different kind of aesthetic vibe to the broadcast of these NBA basketball games.
You know what's going on behind that curtain, right?
What's happening?
Orgy.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought that Jesus was behind it, just sort of spying.
Well, no, he is at an orgy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Jason. I'm so sorry.
That's all right, Corbin. That's
Okay.
all right. I should know what I was getting at.
And so I just like it. It creates, I might even say that the curtain is a big mood, and that the NBA, again, we have a bit of like standardization of aesthetics going on in the NBA right now.
Yeah.
Stadiums and uniforms and looks are just a little too standardized for my liking.
Yeah.
You don't have these sort of idiosyncratic fairs.
Yeah. I do actually see your point, John, and I'm not a big fan of what kind of happened in the later 90s with things going way, way, way out of control, but I do agree that there is a bit of a standardization, especially since Nike took over the uniforms, and hopefully that will change a bit. I mean, that's, I think, one thing like why the Jazz uniform, stood out as something like fun and conventional and different because no one else is doing anything like that. But yeah, I do like I also like the Spurs warm-ups. So good observation.
It's just a lot more fun. I think that it's not a coincidence that as Gregg Popovich took greater hold of the organization, they lost the color, right? He wants everybody to be the same and lame and part of his militaristic.
Another loss of the color. Rodman's colorful hair got traded real quick.
That's true.
Once Gregg got into town. Yeah. You don't feel like you're stretching this metaphor just a little bit?
No, I really don't.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that I could stretch it a lot further, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? All right, John. Continue. Keep going.
Sure. Yeah. Anytime somebody would come to the stadium with like a colorful tattoo, Gregg Popovich, as general manager in 1995, would enter the stands with a cheese grater,
a razor
blade, and get it off of their body.
Yeah.
I could keep going. I'm not going to though.
Okay.
It's disrespectful to the audience.
Yeah. Well, I hopefully they're still here. I don't know, but
so going entirely too hard on David Robinson.
Yeah, a lot of David Robinson respecters have logged off by now.
That's true.
Also, Jerry West respecters, and every one of you is a coward. He should be the logo. I spent a decade destroying him.
I would ask your feelings on Elgin Baylor, but I don't know if we have enough time for that. So, anyone? We haven't really talked much about the actual game itself yet. I don't know how much we want to dig into that. As we already sort of talked about, I had sort of had the impression that this was a very one-sided individual game, but it actually is a fairly, it's a close game throughout most of it, especially into the fourth quarter, team-wise. And, Robinson has a very good game as well as Hakeem does. Anything stand out to you guys in terms of, performances of maybe some guys we've talked about or the main players in question?
Robert Horry is a total assassin in this game, as was his emerging reputation at this time. He doesn't necessarily play great the whole game, but as the Rockets starting to put the game away, he just keeps making important shots. There's
great. A lot of dudes on the Rockets I think might have been a little bit before their time. Horry certainly basically pioneered like a stretch, like a role player stretch forward type thing. I kind of think Drexler might have been better in this era a little bit because I think that he is a slightly cleaner shooter than certain other shooting guards at the time, and I think he probably would have excelled in the game today. I don't know. Yeah,
Cassell, obviously. I mean, I always wonder what would have happened with the Rockets if they had not made the Barkley trade, if they'd kept Cassell and Horry, if they'd have been better off long term if they'd done that. I mean, with Barkley, they did have 1 year where they came very close to making the finals, but then faded pretty quickly after that. I'm just wondering, having a younger team around Hakeem might have been better for him and not sacrificing that depth would have been better for them in the long run.
Yeah, I was thinking about that a lot too.
I mean, Horry went to the Lakers pretty soon after that and started winning titles. So this isn't to say that the Lakers won titles because of Robert Horry, although, he was
helpful, obviously. Yeah, I mean,
Barkley's career is so strange because there are so many things about that dude's game that are sort of clearly immutable to being successful in a conventional way, and he only blew through those things because he was such an incredible athlete and competitor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's kind of the closest parallel to Rodman in a way. I mean, other than being a superstar scorer, and Rodman wasn't, and Rodman was better at the role playing type stuff. But personality and disruption wise, well, Rodman was still more disruptive, but Charles definitely gave him definitely was up there.
He gave him a run for his money.
Yes, so exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I think about that. I think about that Barkley trade a lot. I mean, I was a big fan of the Barkley Rockets. I like those. Not to harp on aesthetics a lot, but I liked those uniforms that they transitioned into.
Hey, John, quick question. You didn't have a problem with the fact that they were completely hideous?
No, because they weren't. They were actually dope.
Yeah, no, they're not. No, they're revolting. They're disgusting.
That's an interesting opinion. I'll take it into consideration.
However, if Rush were on here right now, he would be yelling at you, John. Your friendship would be over with him. So I just
because I'm just looking at him right now. It's They have like 5 stripes across the front. 5 stripes, the number of stripes you want to see on something. They have a hideous font for the number, and they have an even more hideous font that has these like let's call them motorcycle serifs. And there is a rocket going around the Earth, and also the rocket has teeth and a mouth.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I thought you were going to leave out that the rocket is grinning, which is what ties the whole thing together, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because everything you're saying is true, but then you give a grin to that rocket that's taking off, and it just takes it so far beyond the line that we've gone somewhere, I might say, ecstatic. We've gone somewhere transcendent.
You're saying this is the Jeff Koons sculpture of rockets of NBA.
Well, I think that's being quite complimentary to Jeff Koons.
Oh, I apologize.
Is this so? The rocket looks angry to me, not smiling.
It's a sort of
a happy anger,
maniacal grin.
Okay.
Oh
yeah.
Like
and it goes nicely with the court design where it has that huge takeoff stream and like an explosion at mid-court.
I don't even know what you're talking about right now, so I'm going
the court design that the Rockets had when they.
Oh my lord! What is this? all right. This court design is truly insane.
I love it. Like I love that over the top stuff.
For people who haven't seen it, it's the Rockets logo that's on their jerseys. Just hideous, just completely hideous. But the rocket is coming out of an explosion on the south side of the court.
Yeah, rules. It's so good. I also love and I think that we probably won't have a lot of pushback on this. I love the uniforms that the Rockets had in this game that we watched. I think those are classic. I think both of the uniforms that we're discussing
about them, that they don't have an incredibly gross font and a weird Draymond Green looking rocket on them.
You think it looks like Draymond Green?
It has Draymond Green spirit.
I think both of the uniforms under discussion right now are far superior than the ones that they wear and have.
I will say I don't care for the ones they wear now.
No, when they had the like yellow flares on them a couple of years ago, they were straight up McDonald's uniforms.
Yeah, they need new uniforms probably.
I mean, I think they should just go back to some of the old ones. I guess NBA teams aren't allowed to like just completely use old uniforms. They have to like do some like new version of the old thing.
Those baby need to.
Well, they never change it though. I think like after you change it, you can't just go back full time to what you had before. It might be a repercussion of the Nike deal. I don't really know.
We'll see this. The Rockets.
Yeah, that's been a rule for a while. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I believe that is true. Yes.
The Rockets should do smiling rocket throwbacks though.
Yeah, they don't even do the throwbacks for either of these uniforms, which I think if I could buy like this 95 jersey, the classic just sort of like red and white, if I could buy that, a Chris Paul jersey, I would buy it. I would buy that jersey.
Can I tell a story that's maybe a little bit too esoteric?
Well, why not?
Okay. Yeah, so at this party I was at last night, are you guys familiar with Trailblazing?
Yes.
Yeah, the Twitter account.
Yeah, it's a Twitter account, but it's also kind of a sportswear brand that does sort of like a high concept Portland Trailblazers related graphic design novelty shirts. They're not, I feel like novelty might be a bit of an insult. A lot of them are actually very, very, very pretty. The LeBron come to Portland billboard, they were behind that. A lot of fun. But anyway, I'm acquainted with the dudes who run Trailblazing, and we were at a party last night, and Keith was not there, but Keith's wife Hannah was there, and Hannah was talking about how Keith is getting into sneakers that are
sure.
they're like dark blue with green accents. They have way too much paneling. These shoes are just out of control. Like I feel like any sort of objective view of these things would determine that they were a design disaster, but like Keith is just so deep into sneakers now that like good looking sneakers don't mean anything to him anymore. Like now he now he is attracted to like sneakers at the fringes of taste, and I think that like in this time, especially the political situation, the aesthetic situation, like maybe it's time to return to smiling Rockets uniforms,
Absolutely. I don't think that Hakeem's essence was compatible with those.
Oh no,
outrageous
certainly not. The
uniforms,
team
though.
looks unbelievably ridiculous in those uniforms.
Yeah, and I think it's no coincidence that the Rockets ceased to be true title contenders the moment they started wearing those uniforms.
Hakeem is the most dignified motherfucker. I'm sorry, Jason. Is the most dignified dude who has probably ever played professional sports. Like he just exudes so much respect.
Yeah, so much grace and poise.
And doesn't. Yeah. Like you could say Kareem, but Kareem is also like pretty neurotic. You know what I mean? Or dudes like that. But Hakeem is just like Hakeem literally like walks into rooms and like gives people his post-playing essence and his post-playing career. Like that's what he does with his time now, is like deign to offer one shred of his beauty on you. You know what I mean?
Did you guys read that Steve Francis Players Tribune article? Basically, he has this anecdote about how when he was a rookie, they forced him to sit next to Hakeem on the planes and on the buses to sort of learn from him, because obviously Steve Francis is sort of young and boisterous and punky. And
Steve Francis does not look ridiculous in a uniform with a smiling rocket on it.
It perfectly suits him, right?
Yeah.
So there's this anecdote about how Steve Francis is blasting Jay-Z on his headphones while he sits next to Hakeem, who is reading the Quran. The article is like a masterpiece. Like the whole thing is like this. There's also a great anecdote about another player in this game, Sam Cassell, where like they're both Baltimore dudes, I guess. And during his rookie season, there was an occasion where Steve Francis went out with Sam Cassell the night before a game, and they got super drunk together or whatever, and they were having a great time. And then like at the very end of their hangout, Sam Cassell is like, "I'm gonna kill you tomorrow night. Like I'm going to destroy you. You drank entirely too much. It's over for you." And then like Sam Cassell destroyed him the next night.
Good times. So anybody got anything else I'd like to discuss about Hakeem, about Robinson, about 90s big men in general?
My main takeaway that I want the audience to hear: Hakeem good, Robinson bad.
All right, very nice closing, Corbin. Very succinct. John?
I think that, it's a fun time capsule, because as soon as Jordan comes back,
it's over. It's incredibly over.
At this point, yeah, he's already back. And it's weird, like the main foes that stand in the way of the Bulls are not even big men at this point, really, right? They face the Magic the next year, and the Bulls just sweep them. They kill them, and it becomes a more modern league, and just a sort of weird little 2-year window where it's like it was the big man's league again. Yeah. And of course, Shaq has his dominant years with the Lakers later, but there are a lot of caveats to that, and yada yada yada.
Can we very briefly touch on a meta topic here? Do you think Hakeem could have taken one off Jordan?
I don't know. It's hard, because 93, 94 would have been the year they would have met theoretically. And the Bulls, I don't think after the first or second three-peat, the Bulls were necessarily going to be in shape to go back to the finals. In 93, when the Rockets were starting to get good again and they were playing the Bulls, the Rockets really took care of the Bulls, actually.
Yeah.
Vernon Maxwell.
Unless I'm mistaken, Hakeem is maybe the only player who has a winning record against Jordan or something along those lines.
Yeah, Vernon Maxwell actually played really well against Jordan, because he was really good at jabbering and keeping up with that same level of insane intensity. And so he kept Jordan kind of busy. And, they had a lot of guys who could get physical with Scotty, like Otis Thorpe and Horry. It would have been the most challenging if the Bulls went to the finals again in 94 and played against the Rockets. I think it would have been their most challenging opponent.
Yeah, that would have been a fun thing for sure. Yeah, it's weird how I never really thought about how the big men kind of faded right after that. I mean, it was, I guess, kind of mostly the aging of Olajuwon and Ewing, and Robinson with the back injuries, and then Shaq just kind of, not really. Whatever kind of happened, he had some injuries, and obviously left Orlando,
and also he liked spending his spare time appearing in movies where he was a genie who lived in a boombox.
There is also that, yes. All right. Well,
Shaq wasn't so focused until he got to Los Angeles.
The last thing I want to say is that I think that David Robinson's deepest, darkest secret is that his favorite movie is actually Kazam.
I just love it. Shaq's a winning presence.
Very nice.
Can I very briefly break down the two things
real
quick,
yes.
Jason? Take It or Break It is my podcast. John's on it a lot, like once a week, and we talk about sort of current sports topics on that. Sometimes it's a game show, sometimes it's not. It's usually a little goofy, high energy. It's a lot of fun. You should listen to it. But John and I are co-hosting a Take It or Break It sub show that you can subscribe to. It's over on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Take It or Break It, and where we are discussing basketball history. But what we're doing is that we're focusing on one topic and we're talking about it for as long as we can. And right now we're talking about Michael Jordan. And so every week
we're squeezing all the toothpaste out of the Michael Jordan tube.
Yeah. We've done a few games so far. We're going to read some of the book. We're going to read Jordan Rules. We're probably going to read Halberstam's book. We're probably going to read the Wizards book, stuff like that. And we're going to, we're just like doing everything we can with Michael Jordan. I think we know what we're going to talk about next too, but that won't be for quite a while.
Correct. Thank you so much for having us, Jay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for coming on. This was great.
And our regards to Rich,
yes.
Of course.
Of course, you can find us on the Step Back, where with free agency and all the crazy news that's coming up, you can keep up with that and find some other fun podcasts and articles and analysis and all that good stuff. Follow us on Twitter at Over and Back NBA. We're also on Facebook at Over and Back NBA as well. So find us on iTunes, Stitcher, rate us and review us, all that good stuff. So thanks for listening. We're back again soon.